So inside track to Apollo and his pursuit, you know. So you were passionate about skating.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you weren't passionate about it, you wouldn't have done it, right? Mm-hmm. So you start off early on. What was there a particular draw to skating?
You know, I actually wanted to play football, or I wanted to box. That's what
boxing.
Yeah,
really?
those are the two sports I actually wanted to do. My dad said no way to boxing, and football he was like, I don't think so. So I used to swim. I mean, I played all the sports. I tried track, but the kids in my junior high, man, they were like grown men at the age of 13, 14. I was like, there's no way that guy's 13 years old. He's got a full beard and like massive acne. What's going on here? This guy is 6'2", 225.
Testosterone pumping kids.
What is this? You know, kid squats 400. He's 13. Anyway, so I was pretty much, track field was out of the question. And I saw this crazy sport on TV, and I fell in love with it. And like anything, I think most Americans don't even know what short track is, or they used to not know. And I was like one of those people, and I saw it on TV, and I was like, that looks like a really cool sport. I used to inline speed skate, for fun.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
And it seemed similar, so I was like, sure, I'll try that out. And that's kind of how my career began. I learned how to speed skate from, my dad would drive me back and forth to Vancouver, so I would watch some of these Canadian boys skate and basically try to mimic them and copy them and do exactly what I saw in my mind, what they were doing on the ice, which was not always accurate, but it seemed to work. And so without any real training, I was winning races in the North American circuit.
Yeah.
And then I was, got invited to go move to New York when I was 14 and be a part of the Olympic Training Center, the junior development program.
At 14.
At 14, yeah. And then I won the trials at 14.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I won the trials when I was 14 years old. 97 trials, 1997.
That's a long time ago, isn't it?
And you can imagine how some of those guys were pissed, right? Some of the guys who made these guys had made two Olympic teams. Some of these guys had families. Yeah. Like one guy had a son who was like 9.5. He's like, you're not too much older than my son. And no one had seen me before. So I was kind of thrust into the sport. I picked it up really fast.
So I want to just mention one thing here. I think it's interesting what you just said. You were watching guys on TV, you were watching guys skate, and then you go out and you kind of figure out how that was done. For the people watching this, having been around great athletes all of my life and gotten to train some of them, that's one of the things that really great athletes do well. They can watch somebody and do a movement, and then somehow it goes in through the eyes and the brain and then goes down to the body. And it may not be perfect, but I think that's one of the traits of a great athlete.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think you're right.
So going back, I think one of the things that's interesting with people is thinking about how you must have trained. So obviously early on, to get somewhere, to achieve something, you have to push. You have to learn how to push really damn hard. And you've got this body occasionally that says no, and then your mind says yes. So take me through what it was like to learn how to kind of push beyond what you thought or what your body thought it couldn't do.
Well, it went in phases. And the way that my career went was, 2002 was my first Olympic experience. The sport had changed again in 2006 and then again in 2010. So my training had changed with each of those quadrants. And for 2002, it was all about speed, ballistic, strength, power, raw power. So I was a little bit heavier. 2006, a little bit lighter. We didn't really pay attention to a 2-lap time or a 1-lap speed. We paid attention to a 7-lap consistent speed. And then 2010 was a combination of everything. So in 2006, 2007 is when I really started to crank up my training. I'd probably say 2004, 2005, from a intensity level that was double from what 2002 was, and volume that was so far exceeding that I thought was even possible. And so in basically from 97 to 2002, 2003, I never really hit my threshold of training, like my lactic capacity. I would only touch upon it a few times a week, if that. And then
was that be equivalent to like all-out efforts or sub-max efforts?
I would, thinking back, in my earlier years as an athlete, I very rarely went all out in training. Very rarely.
And why? Why do you think you did that?
For me, it was a combination of A, I didn't want to show it, and B, I just had this weird belief system. As an athlete, you have this weird belief system that, okay, I'll save that for the competition.
Right.
And so I didn't want to leave it all out there in practice Although there's some logic to doing both, right? It just depends on which one works for you. But surprisingly, my results were very, very, very good from basically 97, 2002. And so people would watch me in practice. When we arrive at a competition, let's say we go to Germany, let's say we go to China, we get there on a Sunday night, and we don't compete till the following Friday. So we have that time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to acclimate, to get used to the environment, get used to the ice. And the Koreans would come watch us. They would videotape us. They would take lap times. They'd watch our technique. And so during training that week, it's much lighter, but we still go very, very hard. The volume is short, but the intensity.
You don't do as much, but you still have high intensity.
High intensity,
training.
but it's just a lot more rest and less volume. And I would always just kind of go easy, kind of the whole week. And I would touch upon a couple intense intervals here and there, but for me, I didn't. And then I had a period of my career where we went hard all the time. We had a Chinese coach. She was awesome, but her philosophy was totally different. Because in China, when you're coaching 5,000 juniors, who potentially half of them can make the world team, there's only 4 spots in the world team, so you got 2,500 athletes who could be competing for their country.
Right.
They just beat these kids down physically, and they just give them a program that is seemingly impossible, and so the strongest ones rise from the ashes. So they really are survival of the fittest.
Right.
But in the U.S., we don't even have 2,500 athletes who can speed skate.
Right.
I mean, we don't even have real legitimate 2,500 hockey players. So we've got literally a pool of 20 guys who I think can possibly be really, really good at the sport. And so she came onto the program, and she blasted us. I mean, the first year, everybody was overtrained times 10. And then in the next year, everybody was, they were adapting. But still, and I started to go harder in practice. And so pushing through that threshold, I used to do it all the time. But I noticed that my gains were minimal. And so I was lacking in some aspects, my 1,500, 500,000. I started to become not this really good all-around athlete, but a little more specific, but not really good at any one thing. So I was kind of average across the board.
So you think that overtraining and that intensity that often it really ended up hurting your performances?
I think looking back, I wouldn't change anything, but I think looking back at my career, I was so obsessed at certain times in my career with how physically fit I was. That I forgot that I was training the feel out of myself. You know what I mean? And that feel that you have as an athlete, whether you play baseball, whether you run track, whether you swim, whether you're a speed skater, that feel can't be quantified to what you do in the gym. There's nothing that I can do in the weight room, off the ice, that quantifies how I feel on the ice, right? So if I feel good on the ice, but I'm failing during power cleans, I'm failing during my squats, I'm failing during the bike intervals, I don't care because I feel good. And because I feel good, I feel so much stronger and more explosive. And I didn't realize that probably until it was too late. I went into those games overtrained, 06. I still able to pull off a really, really, really good victory, but it was at the end of the Olympics, which I think the reason why was because I was resting the whole game.
The whole time,
Right, and it took me 2 weeks to really recover from that full year of just destroying myself. And I didn't feel like myself until actually that last day, which was really interesting. So pushing through thresholds, absolutely, I believe in it. I just believe that you don't have to do it all the time.
And I think that's a misunderstanding and a bit of a myth today in the world of just general fitness, is that so many people out there involved in programs that are taking it to an extreme level every single day. And I know I pushed hard like you did. I pushed my threshold, but it wasn't all that often. And I could recover. And Bowerman, right behind us here, my coach at the University of Oregon, was very much of what you just talked about. He basically said, train smarter, not harder. And he would push guys, but they were rested more often than they were overtrained.
Absolutely, yeah.